Hey, welcome to my session for the Melanin Magic Conference Year 2, the second annual Melanin Magic Conference. I am Brittany Dent and I'm excited to be here. I am talking about grace versus accountability. And so I am excited to share with you, and you'll get a little notes, handouts page to fill in some things as well. But grace versus accountability. So, y'all know on Instagram, which I'm relatively new to Instagram, how they've been having these versus battles, right? And I did watch a few of them and I enjoyed it. Definitely as a 90s kid, so some of the 90s artists and then artists like from the 80s and all of that, I love. But even with the versus battles, I was confused at first because I'm like, who's the winner? But there's not technically a winner. We all go on like Facebook and go, talk to our friends and say who won, who killed it, whatever. But it's not really a contest or a competition. It's just like a battle, but both artists are winners in some sense of the word. And so the same thing with grace and accountability as an educator. I think sometimes we feel like, okay, we have to have all this grace and therefore there's no room for accountability. But then you have all this accountability and strictness and restrictions and structure and all of that, and there's no grace. But in this presentation, I want you to learn how you can have grace and accountability together for yourself, for your students, for the parents that you come in contact with. Some of you may be social workers, guidance counselors, school nurses, all of that, and even grace and accountability for your administrator, your principal, or your dean of students, or whatever their role is at your particular school. Okay, so grace versus accountability. This is going to be a pretty short session and more like a conversation, even though it's not live. Feel free to reach out to me and let me know your comments. Feel free to fill in your handout that goes along with this, all of that good stuff. Okay, so I want you to look at this balance scale, weight scale, whatever you want to call it, and see how they are even. Okay. And so we're going to talk in just a few minutes. I'm going to share with you in just a few minutes what this means, because right now, this is the beginning of August. Okay. It is time for back to school, whether you've already gone back as an educator or if you go back on Monday or in a couple of weeks. This is like back to school season. And so a lot of times in life, we feel like we should have everything balanced. Even if you're an educator with children or not, you hear this time a lot of times is work-life balance. And I personally do not believe in work-life balance. And so I'll introduce myself really quick. I am known as the teen choice coach. And so I help teenagers and parents of teenagers make the best choices about their academics, their health, and their relationships. And one of the things I teach in that regard is that you may not always have work-life balance, because balance is when things are like equally weighted and even, but you have to worry about harmony and prioritizing. Those are the things, harmony and prioritizing. So the same thing with grace and accountability. They won't always be here. Sometimes you'll have to have more grace for yourself too. And sometimes you have to have more accountability, especially we do that with our students, right? But grace and accountability, both. And so even with this work-life balance, sometimes those things are not equal. And so even for me, I'm a mom of three children and I've been married for almost 12 years. And so I remember I recently resigned from the classroom and I'm a director of programs for a nonprofit for middle school girls. And so I go into the schools as a third party, which I love. But I remember during the school year, like right now, would be really unbalanced in my life because I'll be getting my classroom ready and I'll be shopping for supplies, not just for my own children, but for my classroom and my students, and going to all these PLCs and PLTs and all of these meetings to get ready for the school year. And so we'll be eating fast food and we'll be staying up late and all of that stuff, right? But in a few weeks after that, right, after you get through this back to school rush, then the priorities change. You'll be more focused on your own children or your elderly parents or your spouse or grad school work, all these other things, because you'll kind of have your classroom ready and you'll have your procedures in place and you'll have your roster of students and all of those other things. And so I want us to remember that we don't have to try to have work-life balance if we have harmony. Harmony is when things flow together and work together. So if you have harmony with your home life and your work life as an educator, it doesn't have to be equal all the time, right? And when testing season comes, things are really out of whack, right? It's like nothing else that we're focusing on besides preparing our students for that test or those sorts of things. And so I want you to think about that. I want you to remember that image as well. Okay. So I want you to remember that. Now, I'm going to share with you one other thing. Okay. So when we talk about the harmony, the grace, the accountability, I want us to think of these words, never say never. And I know Justin Bieber, has a song, Never Say Never. Brandy has a song, Never Say Never, right? But never say never, but also never say always. And so when we talk about having grace and accountability, or grace versus accountability, we don't want to use those words. And so I was an English teacher, and so words are so important to me. And we think about the word never, the effect that has. So even when you have your students, don't say he never does his homework, or he never wears his uniform, or my coworkers never help do this and help do that, because those things are not true. And those things prevent us from having the grace that we need for our students and for our coworkers. But on the flip side, you don't want to say always, because that's a lot of times the negative part that we're having with our administrators. He's always asking me to do this. He's always volunteering me to do that. He's always calling me after hours. Like, that should not even be happening. But it's not always. Typically, these things might happen to us a lot or for a reason, but it's not always. And so when we think about having the grace versus accountability for ourselves, for our students, for our colleagues, for our administrators, those are some things we don't want to do. Never say never, and never say always, because those give us a skewed perception, and we don't know, are we being too gracious, or are we not holding people accountable because we are using those words never and always? So that's just one tip. All right, this is a really practical session. We're going to get into something really unique in just a few minutes. The other thing is being aware of yourself and your students and your administrators, and aware of the individual struggles you each may face. And so I taught at a Title I school for a while, but my first ever teaching job was in a very rural area. It was like 99% Caucasian, the student body, and even my coworkers as well. And so some of the things I had to give grace for, I remember having a student get a phone call during my class and say that one of his cows had gotten loose. One of his cows had gotten loose. Like, fill that out on your handout. Like, what got loose? A cow. Like, really, who has this situation in class? And so his cow had gotten loose, and he had to leave class to go home and take care of that and then come back. And in my head, this is absurd. This is crazy. Like, what in the world? And so I had to give him some grace. And that was like one of my first learning experiences with that. And so on the other hand, though, I had some students in the same class who were baseball players, and we had class time to complete a project, and they had time at home to complete the project. And one guy, he was sleeping during class and had not done his project at home or in class the day before. And so I, contacted his parents and said, he's not going to be able to play in the baseball game if he doesn't get his project done. And they were livid. They were mad at me. They were upset, all of that. But I had to hold him accountable. And so that sometimes take connections. I talked to the baseball coach and I talked to the principal, and they were in agreement with me and said he will not play in the baseball game until his project for Ms. Dent is completed. And so you have to have grace when your students' cows get loose and they have to leave class and go take care of it. Give them some grace. But if your students are sleeping in class and all they want to do is play sports and video games and not do their schoolwork, they need to be held accountable. All right. So just put an amen on your paper. Okay. So those are just like real practical and unique situations and challenges, right? And then clarity about yourself, your colleagues, your students, and even the parents, like being clear about the demographics you serve. And so the school that I went to after that, I started substituting at different schools, and they were all so different types of parents, different types of coworkers, so different. And so being clear about who it is that you're serving in your role as an educator. And even if you are a school social worker, school nurse, guidance counselor, or even an administrator, being clear about who you are serving and what your role is. And then you'll be more gracious to people that you aren't directly responsible for, but you'll also hold people more accountable that you are responsible for, if you know your role within your particular school. And then be proactive. Being proactive and creating positivity, I put those together. But I published my first book a year ago during the pandemic, and it's about parenting, but I use these 4 parenting principles from the book in a lot of different situations. And so I talk about being proactive, gaining clarity, creating positivity, and developing a plan. And so even as an educator, when we talk about starting this new school year, like, be proactive, which you're doing that already now. If you're a part of this conference, then you're being proactive. You're getting ready for the school year, right? But also creating positivity. And so a lot of times when we talk about having grace for someone, that still has a negative connotation, like we're letting them slide. But we want to create positivity in our classrooms in practical ways, playing music as your students come in. If it's allowed, post-pandemic, putting up images that look like your students and are positive. And then two other practical ways I like to create positivity intentionally in the classroom is when I'm grading papers. And so you see I have this blue pen here, but I also have an orange one right here. I have pink one right here. I have green right here. I have all of that, right? I have a purple pen here. When you are grading, think about it from your perspective. When I was in college or in graduate school and I would get the red marks all over my thesis drafts, I'm like, oh man, this is horrible. And we know that from back in the day, like the red marks. But even when we think about grading math or something, instead of putting -12, put +17. Instead of telling the kids, like, okay, class, 90% of y'all failed the test, say, okay, class, 10% of you passed the test, but the rest of you did not. So this is what we're going to do. Intentionally create that positivity with those practical things, okay? And that will allow for a lot more grace. And it will help in accountability because your students will see that you are being gracious and positive towards them. And then the last part of that is developing a plan. Develop a plan on how to harmonize and how to deal with difficult situations as an educator. So I'm going to tell you now, I like to be real, okay, and transparent and authentic, all of that. The school year is going to seem so exciting over the next couple of weeks. But once you get into it, even if this is a brand new year, a brand new you, all of that, things can sometimes become difficult, okay? You will have difficult situations as an educator. And so go ahead now and develop your plan of how you will handle those situations, okay? You just have to have your mind made up about it. So part 2 of this, in part 3, we're going to do a little exercise to kind of get our minds thinking a little more graciously and get us a little relaxed as we think about providing grace for ourselves, our students, their parents, our colleagues, our administrators, all of that, okay? But this is what I want you to remember. When you go to school in the next week or 3 weeks, whatever the case may be, remember that this is just a season. And remember priorities over balance, okay? And remember that your priorities might change. And also know that rest will come. Like, this is a crazy time of year, okay? So you may not be sleeping as much or having, working out or eating healthy because you're getting ready for back to school. But my husband loves to watch Game of Thrones and they say winter is coming. Just know that rest is coming. And so it's okay right now. As long as you have harmony, you don't have to have balance. And it's okay to have grace and still hold yourself and others accountable, okay? Those things go together. And then I want you to remember this, that life itself is a cycle of battles and blessings, whether you're religious or not. Like, battles are things we have to fight against, right? Things we have to endure and go through, and they're hard. But then you have blessings, like positive things. And so teaching is a major cycle of battles and blessings. And even as a school nurse, the same thing. And even as the secretary in the front office, like, there are some battles you have to deal with. And then there's some wonderful blessings that you get to experience that other people in the school don't. And so I want you to remember that kind of when you're in the thick of the school year, in the middle of the school year, okay? So battles and blessings, grace and accountability, all of that. Now, one of the things we don't talk about is this grace and accountability for our admins. But I want to tell you this. I had just a few administrators in my 10 years of teaching, and they all had gone through some challenges that as staff we didn't know about. I recently had an administrator who seemed like they were not as present at school or not there like as many days or as long as other administrators may have been. But we found out later that this administrator had a child who had a heart condition, an infant with a heart condition. And so give your administrator some grace, okay? Give your administrator some grace. Hold them accountable for some things, but give them some grace, because you think about it, you're one educator, but they're responsible for a lot more than just you. All right. So I just want to throw that in there. Give your administrators some grace. But sometimes that can be hard, because what do you do when your values as a teacher or even as a human being are totally out of alignment with what you're being told to do or something your administrator expects you to do? That's when you have to hold them accountable or yourself accountable. And so I'll tell you this story as well. This is just a little conversation, right? So I had a student who would not do his work. He was an 11th grader. And so he earned a 33 in my English class. This was several years ago. But I had another student in that same class who was one of the hardest workers I had ever met. But she had some different abilities and some struggles. And so she had like a 50 something in the class. 60 something maybe, but not an A or B or anything like that. And so there was this new mandate that came down from who knows, the board and the state and all of that no student could have less than a 50 on their progress report or report card. So I was extremely upset, and this did not align with my values. I mean, I do not believe in lying. I don't believe in teaching children that if you do nothing, you get half the credit, because if I only show up for half my days of work, I don't get half my check. If I only pay half my bill, I don't get half my lights on. Like, it's like, it doesn't work like that in real life. And so I didn't want to do that. He'd earned a 33. So that's what I wanted him to know, but I wanted to help him to improve that. And so I fought hard. I wrote letters. I cried, everything, because this didn't align. And so I held my principal accountable, and I gave myself some grace, and I decided to curve everyone's grade. And so everyone got a curve. And then I put in the comments that, the grade was actually this, but due to a local policy, it was changed to this. And so I was able to give myself some grace for feeling like I was doing the right thing. But I was also able to hold those students accountable to say that just because they said you get a 50, you didn't earn a 50. And so we have to think about those difficult situations and think about how we can handle them so that we are holding students accountable for the real world that they will enter, and how we're also giving ourselves grace for things that are beyond our control and decisions that we didn't necessarily make. But I do want to tell you this: if you are afraid to stand up for a decision, just know that you can always go to a different school. You can always teach a different grade. You can always teach a different subject. And depending on how big your state is, you can always go to a different district or county. So don't ever have that fear of holding people accountable, okay? Because there's grace for you in other parts of education, right? Or even become a director of a nonprofit that works with middle school students, all right? So that's what I wanted to share before I pull my slides back up really quick and go through this next little section with you, okay? So what happens when we don't have grace and accountability? What happens when we don't have both grace and accountability? What is affected? Our self-esteem is affected. As teachers, sometimes it's hard to feel confident, right? In my book I wrote, it's called Parenting Redefined, Finding the Confidence to Parent Your Teen. Even as adults, sometimes we can lack that confidence to do what it is that we are already great at doing. And so your self-esteem is affected, your confidence is affected, and then even who you want to be in the future. I know I taught public school for 10 years. Sometimes you get unsure, like, do I even want to do this? Or you have these high hopes of becoming a principal, an assistant principal, a superintendent, but then if you have these negative situations and difficult situations with coworkers, students, parents, or administrators, you start to question who you even want to be in the future. So you have to give yourself some grace when you're dealing with those difficult situations. I want to take us through a guided visualization really quick, just for a few minutes, if you will indulge me. I'm going to turn off my camera, okay, so that we can go through this. And it's just a quick couple of minutes of visualization and meditation to help relax you, because I think part of giving ourselves grace is giving ourselves a chance to relax, a chance to breathe, and a chance to meditate and to think positively. There's a lot of stress for the beginning of the school year. And so I want us to meditate and go through this for just a few minutes. And then I'm going to share a couple more things with you and then I'll let you get ready for the new school year. All right. So I'm going to turn my camera off. I want you to close your eyes. Hopefully you're not listening to this while you're driving. So if you're not driving, I want you to close your eyes. Take a deep breath, breathe in and breathe out. One more time, breathe in and breathe out. I want you to begin thinking about some of the difficulties you've had as an educator. If it's your first year, your difficulties getting ready for your first year. Or if it's your 15th year, some of the things that have been difficult over time. Was it the school culture that didn't vibe with you? Was it something about your gender that didn't work for your students? Was there anything about your colleagues that prevented you from doing what it was that you thought was best for your students? I want you to relax. Take one more deep breath into your belly. As you get into a comfortable position, feel your body being supported by the chair or the floor, wherever you're sitting as you're listening to this. And begin to notice your breathing. Continue to take a couple more deep breaths, inhaling through your nose and exhaling slowly through your mouth. If you wish, you can allow your eyelids to close. Become aware of any tension or discomfort in your muscles. Wherever your tension is, just for now, let it drop. You might imagine a warm ball of light in a pleasing color of your choice, approaching the tight areas of your muscles, melting the tension away. Now, as your body finds just the right pace of breathing for you, I want you to imagine yourself in a beautiful classroom at a safe school. This may be a school you've visited, a school you've worked at before, a special place you used to go when you were in school. But imagine being able to be yourself and just relax. Find a spot in this school and notice the sights, sounds, and feel of this wonderful school and the special place in the school you've chosen. As you relax in this place, in this spot, begin to see yourself as the amazing educator you really are. Think about all of your attributes, your personality, your identity that you bring to the school, your interests that you'll share with your colleagues, the talents you'll use to teach your students. What are your thoughts and opinions? Imagine having a successful school year full of grace and accountability. Imagine your colleagues as friends, your students as family, a school with no judgment, no stereotypes, no labels, no wrong perceptions of you as an educator. Imagine being totally free to have fun in your classroom, free to express, free to teach, and free to learn. Take this feeling in and feel the lightness in your body. The release of all tension, all of your worries about the new school year, just let it go. Imagine being totally supported in every way by your administrators. What does that feel like? How does it feel? And think about carrying that feeling and remembering it anytime that this is right for you. When things get hard this school year, remember the feeling you have right now. You can take another big breath now and begin to stretch. And when you're ready, open your eyes. And as you bring your attention back to this space and to this Zoom recording, feeling refreshed, relaxed, and ready to begin a new school year. You can open your eyes. Hopefully, you're feeling refreshed and hopeful for the new school year. What I want you to do for your homework, right? What educators don't have homework for themselves of their own? I want you to make a list, a grace list, and an accountability list. And what this is, make a list of things that you need to have grace for. Maybe it's a particular student that is difficult that's going to be in your class again. Maybe it's your administrator who seems to not like you, or maybe it's yourself. You beat yourself up because your classroom's not ready and you didn't finish this and you didn't finish that. Give yourself some grace. List as many things as you can that you need to give yourself grace for. And then on the other side, make your accountability list. List some things that you want to hold yourself, your students, their parents, your administrators, your colleagues accountable for. Is it we are going to hold ourselves accountable to get these things done, to actually grade the papers over the weekend, that we lug to the car on Friday and then lug back into the school building on Monday that we've never looked at since Friday at 3 o'clock? Are you going to hold yourself accountable? How are you going to hold your colleagues accountable for their behaviors and actions with your students? Okay, so make a list. I believe in writing things down. Write down your list of grace. Who do you need to give grace? And then write your list of accountability. Who do you need to hold accountable? And put yourself probably on both of those lists in whatever way you need to. Okay. And so I'm going to close with those 4 steps I mentioned earlier. You need to gain clarity about what you want for this upcoming school year, how much grace you plan to give, and what things people should be held accountable for, including yourself and your students. And I want you to be proactive. You've already done that. You are a part of this conference, so you're already being proactive and getting things ready and getting prepared. I want you to create positivity. There's a lot of negativity in the world, even within schools. So I always tell people all the time when I talk about education that I was subbing at a school and there was a 4th grade class in the cafeteria and the teacher told them they were a bunch of idiots. Like that negativity in their head, plus the negativity at home and on the radio and everywhere else. So intentionally create positivity in your classroom and in your school for your students, for your colleagues, and for yourself, please. And then develop a plan. What is your plan for back to school? What are you going to do to give yourself some grace? Will it be meditation? Will it be taking a day off? You earned those days, so take them. In school, I missed 3 days from K through 12. And I was like, I need perfect attendance, even as an educator. But I started taking care of myself. I started therapy and I started all these other things to remind me about self-care and giving myself some grace. And so I earned like 1 point whatever sick days per month. I started taking them. Okay. So I want you to do those things. And before we go, I want you to do some affirmations. Okay. This is a pre-recording, but I want you to do these affirmations and you can fill them in on your handout as well. I know you've already written down cows on your handout for what got loose for my student, right? The cows. That was one thing on your handout. So for these affirmations, I want you to fill this out, and so you'll have it. And you can put it in your work binder or stick it up on somewhere, your file cabinet, whatever. But I want you to say this, repeat this after me. I am confident in my abilities. I love myself. I am enough. I don't let others get the best of me because I am a phenomenal educator. Yes. So I want you to take that with you, and fill that in your handout, those blanks for that, as well. And then let's connect. Okay. This is a pre-recording, but I am on Instagram, like I mentioned before. And so let's connect. My Instagram is Britney.Dent. That's Britney with one T, like you see here on the screen. Facebook and LinkedIn is Britney Dent, my first name and last name. Or you can even email me, coachbritneydent@gmail.com. I would love to help you get through this school year, especially if you're a new teacher, like within the last 3 years, because last year really doesn't count because you were online and maybe now you're going back in person. But just, I want to encourage you to give yourself some grace, but hold yourself accountable and do the same for your students, for their parents, for your colleagues, and for your administrators. If you do have children of your own, you can always purchase my book on Amazon. It's called Parenting Redefined. If you search for my name on Amazon, you'll find it there. And you can visit my website, bestchoicecoach.com. And I am glad to help you as you get ready for this school year. And if I can't help you, I know someone who can. So thanks so much for being a part of the Melanin Magic Conference Year 2. Hopefully you enjoyed this session and you'll check out all the other amazing sessions as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. Check me out on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to fill out your handout. Have a great school year.